since he was an entrepreneur, and since then he changed some of his positions. I will give a brief background about Izhar in Hebrew. I'll try to translate in English, and then we will move to the interview in English. First of all, thank you, Izhar, for coming here and squeezing 1 hour in your busy day for this event. We much appreciate that. And I hope that we really set the expectations of this interview. So Izhar, you're born in '63. You're an entrepreneur, venture capital, also a social entrepreneur in the startup community, a writer, a journalist, a radio, working in the radio, and also a lecturer.
All right.
A nice combination. You're born in the kibbutz. Your parents born in Argentina, and you moved to Jerusalem before the 60 Days War in 1967. You're born in the city, and you grew in the city, and you learned in the Hebrew gymnasia in Jerusalem. You've been in the army for the Tzanchanim. I don't know what you say.
Paratroopers.
Right. And you were a fighter in the first war, in the first Lebanon War in '82. That's a short brief about Izhar. At Startup Grind, we visited our community 3 years ago. One of the toughest nights ever we had in Tel Aviv that we had at that time, or hasn't. What has been changed or hasn't changed since then? What you can tell us about it? What do you feel? Because we know that we still have missiles, we still have a very warm atmosphere around it. Although we move forward from the high-tech business and the startup, what can you tell us about this?
Wow, so first of all, thank you for hosting me here. My pleasure being here. And Shachar, good luck with your new path. And I'm not sure if that's an upgrade or a change of position, but good luck. You have been very successful in promoting the community concept here in Israel, and I think that you're one of the people who pioneered the notion of community here within the high-tech ecosystem. So thank you for doing all of that. Today we are used to the notion of communities and helping each other and so on, but this is pretty much because of you and people like you, so very happy to be here again. And just to close the circle, you mentioned this briefly, but I know Nurit for more than 20 years, from the days when Nurit led an investment of a strategic investor of my own company. The name was Business Layers. The name of that strategic investor will not sound familiar to many of you, which goes to show how the tech industry changes so quickly. But there used to be a big company. Right, some of you will recognize the name. There used to be a company called Novell. How many recognize the name? All right, about 30% of the people. Novell was the largest network, software network provider, vendor, technology vendor. Funny to mention this, but they were competing fiercely against yet another interesting company called Microsoft. And we are 20 years later. Most of you have not heard the name Novell. By the way, pretty much the same as the name Bebo. How many of you know the name Bebo? 3. Bebo, the largest social network before Facebook. Almost none of you recognize the name. So Nurit led an investment in my company. We were a software company. Today we would be called a cyber security company. Novell was interested in the space. They invested in us. It was some sort of a new concept, a strategic investor of an Israeli company, first investment of Novell ever in Israel. And I remember that Nurit led this round, and once it was announced in the papers, I get a call from the mayor of Ra'anana. Our office was in Ra'anana, and he says, "Congratulations, we are very proud, the city of Ra'anana, no big buildings in Ra'anana, no nice or Amdocs, or, we are in a small garage in Ra'anana." And he says, "How can I help you?" And I said, "If you could help us put some parking spaces around the office, that would be great, because we would be walking 300 to 500 meters at least in dirt and mud, and it was tough those days." So anyway, this is my memory. And your question was about that specific night and what has changed. So I think that what happened in that specific night where we were getting together in a Startup Grind event here in Tel Aviv, was it a terrorist attack or yet another missile attack?
No, there was a terrorist attack.
I think it was some sort of for a severe terrorist attack in the area of south of Tel Aviv, and most of the people who tried to get into the meeting couldn't make it because of police activity and people going all around, the sirens and ambulances around the city and whatnot. You know, it's hard to say, but or difficult to say this in that aspect, but not too many things have changed in the sense of we still live the lives of people who on the one hand develop these great technologies and great entrepreneurs who build together great companies, and on the other end we are facing all kind of threats and risks and dangers and whatnot. But the one thing that did not change is here we are, and I'm sure that even if there was a threat of sirens and missiles or whatnot, we would still be gathering here this evening to speak about entrepreneurship and innovation and whatnot, and that's great. That's great news. By the way, the threat is still there. I just heard on the news we are gathering our people in the area surrounding Gaza and whatnot. So I think that. Here within this community, we got used to the fact that we can work in parallel. Some of us, like myself, have children in the army who have been called this week, by the way, to stay on alert in order to do whatever they are told to do. And on the other end, we do this, which is great. So we are still developing our resilience. We are still working hard to try to make it look as a normal life, which they are to a certain extent. And on the other end, I think that we have developed on the technology front, on the innovation front. We have never stopped here for a moment for the last, well, one could say 71 years almost. But definitely over the last 2 decades, the Israeli high tech has taken off in a very significant way in several fronts. And just to mention a few of them, I start with the world that I'm coming from over the last few years. Funding has grown steadily year after year over the last 10 years. And people are wondering, when will this stop? Because, you know, we are just growing and growing and growing. And last year was a record-breaking year of investment in Israeli high tech. About $6.5 billion funded about 800 to 1,000 companies, all of them with innovative technologies, entrepreneurs, bright people, who put together wonderful companies. So funding continues to flow in. Innovation is done by people like you, so that continues. And we have also kept up with the international market. So 10 years ago, you know, I don't even know if 3 years ago, when was that interview, 3 or 4 years ago? Here,
4 years ago.
4 years ago. So, okay, so I don't even know where autonomous cars were that big then as they are today. I don't know that blockchain was that, I know that it was not that big as it is today, and other technologies. So we kept up with international trends. Actually, I think that I should carefully say that we significantly contributed to the creation of some international trends. Autonomous vehicles or technologies for autonomous vehicles is one of the things that we have developed here, which is kind of leading the front around the world, cybersecurity and others. So I think that, but you know, you asked me what's changed, so maybe this has not changed because we keep innovation going, we keep entrepreneurship going, we keep crazy ideas flowing around, and we are not afraid of stating those ideas, we are not afraid of going out of our comfort zone and developing these crazy, great companies that we see all around us. So, you know, I don't know that much has changed since I was last year.
Yeah, 3 years, that's good. Let's get back a little bit about your background. You were born in the kibbutz. You moved to Katamon neighborhood in Jerusalem, which is, I think at that time was not the best place maybe to grow up in Jerusalem. And you find a way into the world of high-tech, entrepreneurship. What do you think about, how do you think you get that, you know?
So, Yeah, I think that
At that time, that's for sure that it wasn't so. Now we see people, from the peripherals of Tel Aviv. We have communities that growing them up and taking care of them. But at that time, it wasn't so famous. It wasn't so regular.
Yeah. So, I'm always asked what makes for a good entrepreneur. And frankly, I don't know the answer. I just know that entrepreneurs know that they are entrepreneurs, and that defines you. I don't know that you can be educated to become an entrepreneur. I know that you can learn, you can acquire skills, you can go and get more professional in several sets of skills that would make you a better entrepreneur. But I think that it starts with your own understanding of who you are and what you are. How many of you define themselves as entrepreneurs? Many crazy people here. Same here. So I don't know when do you realize that you're that kind of a person, but I think that once you know it, you are doomed to be what you have been defined to be. So my first entrepreneurial stint, I guess, was at the age of 16. We were 5 boys who needed to afford some of our living, so we put together a group that actually distributed the flyers of one of the largest chains, then the only chain for pharmaceutical consumer products. Actually, the name was Superfarm. They're still around. Yeah, maybe because we helped them. So we are talking the 70s in Jerusalem, and Superfarm is innovative. So every month they print 50,000 pamphlets, newsletters with coupons and all kind of news about the very important toothpaste that they have just started to distribute and whatnot. So these are 8 to 12 pages of pictures, most of them black and white, and now you have to distribute them. So forgive me, the younger generation, no internet around. We are talking the 70s. You distribute by walking around the city of Jerusalem and going to every mailbox in the city. And we were the group who would do that. So think about many buildings, many mailboxes, and we carry those brochures on our bags in very heavy backpacks. And there's a whole distribution system. We have to plan carefully because you go to a neighborhood, you put 2 people here, 2 people there, and so on. But it was, on the one hand, it was very hard work. On the other hand, we got paid very nicely. I kept this as a secret from my parents until about 10 years ago because we skipped school during those days. Is this on tape? No. Go to school. School is important. Never skip one day at school. But we did this on a monthly basis for almost 2 years. When I disclosed this to my parents about 10 years ago, they were in their 70s. I had to be very careful. I put them on the couch, and I told them, look, I have to tell you a 40 years old secret. They took it very nicely to a certain extent. Hello, Mom. What's that?
You were successful since then.
Right, so we did this. That was so my first entrepreneurial stint. I can tell you, but going back, my parents left their comfort zone by coming to Israel. If there are Olim Chadashim over here, good for you. It's a very significant move, a very brave move. And I salute to all of you who left their homeland in order to come here. I know how it feels because I'm a second generation of parents who left everything in order to come here to Israel. And that's an entrepreneurial act by itself, and I know to appreciate this. I think that it is even tougher these days than it was maybe 56 years ago. So they did that, and then they moved from the kibbutz to Jerusalem, which was a very significant move. Those of us who grew up in Israel may know the songs of leaving the kibbutz and how tough it was and how significant the move is and so on. When I was about 15 years old, my father gathered the family, which is my mother, my brother, and myself, 4 people, and he said, I'm going to engage with a big move. I'm leaving my very secured, nicely paying position within the Israeli government, and I'm going to become an entrepreneur. He didn't say that, he didn't use the word entrepreneur, I think, but he said he was going to be atzmai in Israel. That means independent. That means he was going to start a new business. And he asked for the family blessing because, as you mentioned, we grew up in a very limited economic situation, so just taking the risk was a significant step by itself. And this is already when he has a job, which is secured, paid by the government, and so on. So he wanted to get our blessing. We gave our blessings. My brother, who was then in his, I think he was like 22, 23 years old, he was post his army duty. He was an officer. He had been an officer in the Israeli army, a paratrooper. So he said, I'm giving you all my life savings, which are the savings from the army, giving to my dad. And I said, I'm giving you my bar mitzvah savings, which are kind of, and you should know that those days, what you would get for bar mitzvah is not the checks you're getting today. I got a bialik, a book of songs from, by a composer, not a composer, by a poet called Bialik, and I got a number of pens and all that, but I had some lirot, some shekels in the bank. So we pledged our support. So I knew what becoming an entrepreneur means, and then I became an entrepreneur myself. I always knew that I will. When I was 30 years old, I started my first stint as an entrepreneur, and then from that point on, I was never employed by anybody except for my own companies or my own partnerships. It was a path that I always knew that I would engage with. And now going back to your question, I think that entrepreneurship is a way to open opportunities. I think it's a way for many people to control their own destiny. I think that we are now in the 21st century. The whole notion of getting a job has become very complicated. And the culture of somebody paying me for the next 50 years, I think, is going to go away if it has not gone away anyway. So I think that when I educate my kids, I don't necessarily tell them to become entrepreneurs, but I tell them to always control their destiny, never to assume that they will be employed by somebody for their lifetime or for an everlasting career, because that will not happen. And we saw all those secure jobs, You worked for Novell. That was the greatest company. It was secure forever until it totally disappeared. And same for Netscape and same for many other technology companies. But it also happened with banks. It happened with any other industry that one could think of. I think that the 21st century represents many opportunities, but also threats for the younger generation. And I think that the only way to look at yourself is controlling your destiny, knowing that you have to always improve, always educate yourself on new technologies, new concepts, new career types, and so on, and never to assume that you are going to be employed forever. That's a very dangerous assumption. So I think that entrepreneurship is only a way of life, which people have to assume that they will somehow have to engage with sometime during their career.
Yeah, I think that we already heard, and we're hearing all the time that the professions that we have today won't exist in 10, 20 years, and we don't see our children getting educated or getting the right tools for the next generation or the next profession. Any comment about this? What do you think? Because you said you taught or you were teaching your children to think about their destiny, about their future, about what they do. What do you think about
So the common assumption is kind of agreed upon by so many people is 50%, at least 50% of the jobs the kids who attend school today are going to be employed with when they grow up do not even exist yet. So they don't have a name for those jobs that they will have to apply for, they will have to acquire when they grow up. What do you educate them for? How do you educate people? What do you actually do? And I think it's not surprising for us because we have seen this happening. Web designer, digital marketing.
UI UX.
What's that?
UI UX.
So all these new types of jobs that were not there 25 years ago. And this is within our lifetime. And things are changing much faster today than they did 20 or 30 years ago. So that's a valid assumption. It should be a basic assumption for anybody who wants to plan for their life, and definitely for parents who want to educate their kids, and school systems and so on. I was, by the way, a volunteer for many years on the ORT network of schools here in Israel. I was on the board of directors. So we tried to plan the strategy for what do you educate kids for, how do you apply what you understand from the real world onto the education system. And I'm volunteering today as a chairman of a non-for-profit organization for non-formal education of kids at risk. And the same kind of questions apply over there, but even at a higher magnitude because many of them do not even attend schools. So what do you provide them with tools so that they can continue with their lives as they grow up as young adults in this country or anywhere? So I think that the basic or the bottom line here is you have to educate people to get education, to get self-education, and to open their minds to acquiring as much knowledge as they could. And what you provide people is with the tools to learn, the tools to acquire information, and the tools to analyze information and to make priorities, to make tough decisions. That's what you can do. That applies for young kids, definitely that applies for high schools, that applies for universities, and that applies, by the way, to all of us in this room. We have to keep ourselves educated. We have to keep ourselves going through the ladders of better and better in whatever we do. Would it be marketing, sales, technology, finance, whatever we do. This is a fast-moving world, and the pace is so fast, and there's no excuse for ourselves. We always have to be in a position where we know more, we are competitive, and we educate ourselves in order to get prepared for the next step. By the way, it's also a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to get educated, to acquire more skill sets and so on. There is never an end point. There's always something new to learn. There's always something new to acquire. I'm saying this as over the last 60 days, I'm sort of in a new career. So I'm learning so many things, which could be scary. On the other hand, it's kind of fun. You know, I'm learning so many new things. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Any insights, thoughts, tips, input you can give to the entrepreneurs from your careers and really looking forward or looking to the future and the changes that we see? You know, the things that we understand that the professions won't be the same. Maybe the entrepreneurship need to turn somewhere else. You know, the technology, things from your experience and seeing so many technologies, so many entrepreneurs that you can give to our audience.
Yeah, so, wow, that's a big question. Now I have to be responsible. I'm giving some advice. So my first advice to all of you entrepreneurs.
No commitment, you know, just
I'll put a disclaimer here. So my first advice to all of you entrepreneurs is never take advice too seriously. Always listen to advice, always seek advice, but then it's up to you to prioritize. It's up to you to trust better some people and to trust less others. You know, this is about you gathering information, as we said earlier. This is about you analyzing information, putting priorities, and so on. It's about you. That said, you know, I think it's a very good practice to seek feedback from other people. And other people could be as defined by yourselves as the right people for your business, for your personality, for the context of what you're doing. Always seek advice. I'll give you an example. And I'll give you an example because when we say that, we sometimes have the picture of somebody who is very matured and seasoned and has gone through the same path as we did for so many years and so on. So I'll give you an example. As I said, I'm volunteering in an organization that deals with the young generation of kids at risk. And when I moved to this position about 3 years ago, we decided to put together a board of directors, and I'm the chairman, by the way. So I insisted that within that board, we're going to have young people who actually went through the same path as the one that we want to deploy to the kids who are now in the program. So we actually put together a young lady we put her in the board, a young lady who is 23 or 24 years old, who just graduated from the program and so on. And people told me, you know, what are we going to learn from her? You know, what's the crazy idea? And, you know, we are all seasoned, we are all experienced and so on. And I said, I believe that we should be listening to people who belong to that target market that we are trying to address. And that target market in this case is the young generation. In your case is whatever your target market is. So, and believe me, what this young lady has told all of us, very seasoned, clever people who have done so many things in their lives, what she told us and what she taught us is as important as anybody else's input. So this goes to show that you can seek advice from people who are not necessarily 74 years old, who have been there forever. If there's anybody here who is 74 years old, that's great. That's wonderful, nothing against this, but when I'm seeking advice personally from people from all kind of perspectives, all kind of backgrounds and so on. And I think it's very helpful, and I definitely encourage all of you to look around for the right tips, the right advice, and so on. I also encourage you to look for different types of backgrounds when you seek that advice. I know that we VCs like to give advice and we like to see that people listen to us, but there are so many other people with good perspectives that you could think about. And I think that for an entrepreneur, yes, it is very important to listen to a VC, especially if you're seeking their investment. So you better listen carefully to what their preferences are, what their advice is, and so on. But listen to other entrepreneurs. I think that peer-to-peer advice is critical and very important. And actually, this kind of network within Startup Grind is, I think, an unbelievable value that the network provides to any member of this great activity. If you are selling to a market, definitely go seek advice from the market itself. If this is B2B, that's quite easy. You go out and seek advice from customers. If this is a B2C business, try to figure out how you're going to get good feedback from the market, which is more difficult than just speaking to a number of customers. But again, going back, I think that the main advice over here is listen, seek advice, and make sure that you have different perspectives, and then it goes back to you. By the end of the day, make your own decisions. I always tell the CEOs of companies that I'm involved with, make a decision. Don't seek those so many tips and so many advices and so on, because you're going to be inundated. And in many cases, I see people find it hard to make a decision. By the end of the day, a business moves by decisions. You have to make a decision. You have to assume that you are not always going to be right. This is why you have to have a trusted network of advisors, board of directors and whatnot. You are not always going to be right, but you have to make those decisions. You have to stand by them, and you have to be willing to admit sometimes mistakes, which is kind of hard, but this is part of life, so we have to do that as well.
So that moves me to the next question, which is connected to the question I just asked, is that in one of your interviews, you said that as a partner in a venture capital firm, when you speak with a startup founder, it helps you to channel into their mental state.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
Mental state?
Something like this.
Okay.
This was the translation.
All right.
In Hebrew, it says that זה עוזר לך להתחבר למצב המנטלי.
I'm kind of concerned because the head of my party now is accused by others about something related to mental whatever. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, we're not there, but something more. Getting to maybe the mind.
The mindset.
The mindset.
Okay.
Maybe that's the correct word. A word of the entrepreneur or the startup that you're. What do you mean about that, really? What is from your side mindset when you sit with an entrepreneur or a startup company, trying to get into their mindset in order to, especially today when you had such a long career and you did so many things and you moved and you not just expose yourself but evolve during your career.
So
it's difficult to go back.
Right.
As a startup, as an entrepreneur in a small startup.
Yeah, I think that as an investor, as much as it is hard to believe, but investors also make tough decisions. the first tough decision with any investment is just to make that investment. And think about this. Some of you already told me that you raise money, you are in the process of raising money. Think about this from the other side. You come to my office, or I come to your office. We have never met before. Maybe we have heard about each other, but in most cases, this is like, a new engagement. We get to know each other. 6 to 8 to maybe 12 weeks later, you are going to have $2 million, $5 million in the bank. I have no collateral. I have nothing to hold against you except for a piece of paper that says that you're going to do your best in order to make this company successful. There are no ramifications if you fail. I get my bad reputation, you get your frustration, but that's about it. So, and that happens very quickly. That happens within a process of, hey, we don't know each other, to 6 to 8 to 12 weeks later, a lot of money in the bank. Now think about this in any other context, this would never happen. Go to a bank here, anywhere here in Tel Aviv or in New York City or in everywhere else in the world, ask for $2 million and see what they tell you, okay? But this happens, and the main reason that it happens is this is people to people. So we have to get to that barrier of not knowing each other to trusting each other very quickly. And it's a two-way situation. It's not only about me trusting the entrepreneurs, it's about the entrepreneurs trusting me. What we investors try to figure out is this the right team? Do we understand what motivates these people? Do we like what motivates them? Do we understand the combination of skill sets that they represent? Do we trust that this is the team that is going to make it happen? Is the right combination between the skill sets what is needed for this specific venture? What is missing here? Will they trust my advice? Will they listen to me? And I didn't even say anything about will they, steal or will they set me up, because that's not the question. We always trust the people. And frankly, it's almost funny given what I've just said. Zero knowledge to $2 million in the bank in a few weeks. In this industry, the level of fraud, the level of all kind of bad stories goes down to zero. Actually, it's almost insignificant as compared to the amount of money we are dealing with. Remember, $6.5 billion invested in people like you last year. I can bet that as it so happened in so many cases in years ago, there was no fraud in those $6.5 billion, 800 companies. This is almost unheard of in any other industry. So this is part of getting into the mentality. You have to trust people, you have to understand them. Moving this fast forward, I think that what has helped me in many cases is when an entrepreneur faces a problem, trust me, I've been there before. I've seen everything. I always tell entrepreneurs, I gave many lectures about what VCs try to accomplish and how VCs, how investors think and so on. And people, in many cases, raise their hands and tell me horror stories about how tough investors are and how untrustworthy they are and whatnot. And I always say, look, I've been there. I raised more money than, I guess in this room, I raised money more than all of you together. Forgive my, it's not arrogance, it's just my assumption. Maybe some of you raised more, but I raised a lot of money. I got so many negative answers, more than any of you in this room, and definitely I almost would trust that more than all of you together. I got negative answers, and I got into so many situations, and I can tell you so many bad stories, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is you are entrepreneurs, you want to get your point, you want to get your venture into the next level and so on. So forget about the stories, they're not productive. Let's get focused in what really matters. And that's part of my understanding. That's my part of understanding the mentality of entrepreneurs. I know when an entrepreneur comes to me and consults, I know what they are going through. I know what he or she are telling me, even if they're not saying that. I know the tense, I know the pressure, I know the feeling of, okay, I have money for the next 45 days. I have no idea how am I paying electricity, payroll, debt, whatever. I just don't know. I only know that I have 6 weeks and I have to make this happen, and that happened to me more than once. So when somebody comes to me, I know what they are going through, and I think that by the way, part of this is helpful, part of this is not that helpful in my business as an investor, because investors should make their decisions regardless of the personal situation, regardless of the sentiments or whatnot. But it is, you know, it is helpful to a certain extent. What?
I said no talking about the technology even. First of all, as a person to person.
It's a person to person, and you know, it's a meeting of minds, a meeting of interests that check into creating all that 5, 6, 10 years process on both ends, investor and entrepreneurs, all of them together in one boat.
Yeah. Something in between. What did you like more, being an entrepreneur or an investor?
An entrepreneur. That was easy. Yeah. That's, by the way, that's.
So why did you move to be an investor?
It's never too late.
First of all,
Now it's late.
look.
The next
Let me tell you, because some of the people here are close to my age. Most of you are younger, but I will speak to the people who this may make sense to. So, about 3 years ago, I drove here on Ayalon, and there was a big sign on one of those billboards that said something like, when was the last time, מתי הייתה הפעם האחרונה, when was the last time that you did something for the first time? מתי הייתה הפעם האחרונה שעשית משהו בפעם הראשונה? Which, if you think about this, is a very interesting question. And I always promised to myself that there's never going to be a last time that I'm doing something new. So, just to put things into context, yes, I was an entrepreneur. I started a number of companies. 2 of them were venture-backed. I went through the motions. I led 2 companies to a successful exit, and then I joined a venture capital firm. But that was an entrepreneurial act because we were not present in Israel, so I had to open an office here. It is less tough than opening a startup company, believe me. But still, you know, I had to start something from scratch, which I liked. And then I started other things which were not necessarily venture-backed companies, but things that were important to me. So I started the Startup Stadium about 7 years ago as a community for entrepreneurs so that they can share stories, support each other, sort of a startup grind, but only virtual and online. That's how we began. Then we drifted into physical meetups and meetings and so on. And today we are still, I think, the largest community of entrepreneurs in Israel. We have about 45,000 people in this community. So, you know, to me, this is as entrepreneurial as starting a technology company. I started this program within the, you know, I told you about my volunteering as in Tzala, which is for kids, challenged kids and so on. It was an existing program for 20 plus years, but my entrepreneurial spirit brought it to a different structure, which I hope that will prove itself as the right structure for this organization. I started, as you said, a radio program. I started many things. So for me, it never ended. By moving to the venture world, you know, I continued to do what I like. And going back to you, I think that creating, to your question, creating new things is so much fun and so much satisfaction that I would encourage any of you to think about the last thing you have created. And if you have not created yet, it's never too late. Think about something, whatever it is, an online community, a newspaper column. I started a newspaper column, by the way, which I ran for 11 years. I ended up having to end it about 6 weeks ago. This is one of the sad parts of moving into politics. Not because I wanted, by the way. The first phone call that I got was from the Globes, and they said, you have to stop writing. This is against some sort of a law, so as a law-abiding citizen, I will do that. But think about this yourself. Start something new is one of the greatest things that we can all do, and I encourage all of you to do new things, always.
Yeah. And you also involved very much in social entrepreneurship, not just Tzahla, but also Kamatech, the world of Orthodox, choosing entrepreneurship, and also Tech Career, which is entrepreneurship among the Ethiopian community,
yeah.
Which I myself personally very much appreciate. I think that they can do amazing things in their sector. Do you see, what do you think about these kind of great people, the Orthodox and the Ethiopian, from the entrepreneurship in the high-tech business in Israel? Because we see it very, well, we start to see it lead them little by little, I think, getting into companies, being entrepreneurs and moving to this world. We still don't see them as common as we see others.
And that's a major fault of the Israeli economy, society, policy, and whatnot. And I think that as a society, we could have done much better. And I think that part of this is we can always blame the government, the administration, and all kind of good targets to blame for. But then it goes back to the question is, what are you willing to do in order to change the situation? I'm a great believer that we can apply change. We can effect change. We means we individuals. And I think that one of the major mistakes people do in that context is that when they think about changes, they immediately think about, how do I change the world? That's legit, and some people do. But I think that changing the world of one child is as important as changing the world. I think that changing the world of one family, one Orthodox family, which can now afford better living, better education for the kids, is as important. So I'm totally satisfied with helping a limited number of people just because I can. It's interesting. I always do. So in one of my meetings, trying to raise donations for my non-for-profit, I met with this very wealthy representative of a very wealthy family, and they're great people. They donate millions of dollars for all kinds of good purposes. And so I made my case and presentation, and he asked me, okay, how do you solve the problem of all challenged kids in this country? Show me a plan. And I said, look, I don't know. I can show you how we solve the problems of about 1,500 of them. And then if you help me, 2,500 next year. And he said, no, I'm not interested. Show me a solution for everything. So I'm not there. And I'm happy with providing a solution within the span that I can. Going back to entrepreneurs, and specifically the Ethiopian community, I think this is one of the biggest misses in Israel overall. How many of you have been working within the Israeli high-tech for, say, the last at least 5 years? Okay, so most of you. How many of you within the last 5 years have seen an Israeli Ethiopian working in some sort of a managerial capacity in your high-tech companies? One, okay. I'm surprised, okay? Because we have one here, or two. Wow, great statistics. How many of you have worked with a VP of some sort of kind within the Ethiopian community? Zero. And we are in a democratic country, advanced, OECD, Western, blah, blah, blah. This is a totally inconceivable, unacceptable situation, which is the blame of all of us. And once you understand that this is on all of us, and not on some minister in the government, on an MK or whatnot, once you understand that, I think the next logical point is to take responsibility. So I was lucky about 6-7 years ago. I got a phone call from Naftali Avraham, who is a great Ethiopian leader here within the Ethiopian community here in Israel. And he said, I want to come to visit you in your office. And he came and he told me the story, which is a very significant story of a brave kid of 14 years old, leaving his family, walking the Sudanian desert for about a year, through all the hardships, getting almost killed at least 3 times by Sudanian soldiers, by thieves, by all kind of hazards that they went through, including the need to protect some young girls who were with them, protect them from dangers such as rape and anything that you could have in mind. And coming here to Israel, he ended up here at the age of 15 with no family, not speaking Hebrew, just a lone kid here in Israel. Think about your kids. Some of you may have 15 years old kids. Think about them without you, somewhere in a remote country, not knowing the language and not knowing anything. And Naftali is now 30, when I met with him 35 years later, mid-40s, married, 3 kids, 2 titles, one from the Technion, one from the Tel Aviv University, and getting his 3rd title in education, by the way. And after having graduated from the Israeli Army as a Rav Seren, an officer in the Israeli Air Force. What's that? As a major in the Israeli Air Force and so on. So you look at him and you're inspired on the spot. And so he and I created this sort of a partnership where he suggested some things and I took responsibility and we did some things together. And I can tell you that my contribution there was very modest, but we have to embark on this, all of us. We have to make sure that when somebody asks the same audience 5 years from now the same question, at least half of you will raise your hand. Because those people, by the way, they live here in Netanya, they live in Tel Aviv, they live in Herzliya. 10 minutes driving at midnight, but 10 minutes driving from here. And they're not here. They're not present within the Israeli economy. This is just unbelievable.
Still today, you see less because I start to see them little by little, but do you think that it's successful
we see
sort of entrepreneurship and getting them
So we see initial positive signs. I have seen a number of entrepreneurs or courses for entrepreneurs ran by Tech Career and by others, and I've seen people going on to start their own little companies, which is the little beginning of doing something. I'm optimistic because I've seen the same within the Orthodox community, and by the way, we connected them, Kamatech and Tech Career, so that they could learn from each other. But it's basically the same. When I was first introduced to Moshe and Avremi, these are two Orthodox Jews representing two mainstreams within the Jewish Orthodox community. One of them is Litai Hasidic, and the other one is from the Hasidic branch of Gur. So two mainstream, we would call them extremist Orthodox, and they were introduced to me by Yossi Vardi, who called me one day and said that I have to do these two guys over here. I'm optimistic, but I have no idea what can I do. And I said, fine. And then we started working, and we said the way to promote high-tech within the Haredi community will be by putting together companies. How do you put together companies? You seek Orthodox entrepreneurs to put together high-tech companies, which is a total oxymoron. Anything that I said now 7 years ago sounds illogical, because we secular people think they don't work, they don't know mathematics, they don't know English, they don't know high-tech, they don't know what are we thinking. So we put together Call Kore. We put together an announcement calling for high-tech entrepreneurs from the Haredi community to come to a Haredi accelerator, which sounded like a joke 7 years ago. And we had about 10 applicants. We chose 6 companies, and that was the first one that we put was 4 years ago. 3 years ago, we had about 80 or 90 applicants, which are companies that applied, and then 10 were accepted to the accelerator. The third batch, we had more than 200 applications, all of them run by, and to run forward, the accelerator that we just started earlier this year had more than 400 applications. And again, 15 or so were accepted. In the process of doing that, they also raised a fund, a small fund to fund. The name is 12 Angels, because we initially were 12 angels who invested in that fund. Today, I think they have 80 or 90 investors in that fund. And so just to give you the statistics, they have in their database today, they have about 500 companies put together by Haredi, Orthodox, Jews. They say that they do not discriminate. So in some cases, they have secular co-founders. But the idea is, and that's even better, because then you put together the two sides of Israel in one company. But there are thousands of Haredi Orthodox people working in those companies. And think about the ripple effect. Think about somebody who works for a high-tech company, then goes back home to Bnei Brak, and goes back with what they see and what they learned, and they can afford a better living for all of them. They can, in some cases, afford better education. We call this better, so I'm not sure if that's the right definition, but a broader education for the kids if they wish to give them broader education, and so on. So I think what I've seen over there makes me more optimistic about the ability of the Ethiopian community to break the glass ceiling, and others as well.
On the other hand, we see many young entrepreneurs or the smart brains of Israel getting out of the country, escaping away to the States, or to now Australia is the big hype of investment. What do you think can really keep them here and really let us build flagships for Israel that, or really large companies that I think we also lost in the last 10 years because we saw Converse falling apart, we saw ECI falling apart, we saw some large exits like the one in Mellanox last week. What do you think can really keep the good brains or the good companies here in Israel and having the next wave of flagships?
So it's a very complex question. Let me first say that the world has become flat and competitive. And competitive means also competing on talent. And I think it's legitimate for Israeli entrepreneurs to seek opportunities elsewhere. And in many cases, people move around the world just because they feel like moving, they want to experience, and so on. In many cases, people do come back here. So I think that I relocated to run my company in the United States because it was practically impossible to run it from here. And then I relocated back to Israel. And I see this happening in many cases. And I think it's good for the high-tech business here, for the high-tech ecosystem, to see people coming back. They come back with their experiences, with their acquired skill sets, and so on. So I think all in all, that's helpful and productive. What keeps people here? We have to stay competitive. So we have to make sure that the ecosystem is vibrant. We have to make sure that there is enough funding here. We have to make sure that incentives are put here for companies that can grow to become the next Mellanox, the next Checkpoint, the next what have you. We have to realize that in a very competitive, flat world, most of the companies will be acquired. It's not an Israeli phenomenon. Most of the Silicon Valley bright stars do get acquired. Some of them become huge companies like Facebook and Uber and others, and most of them will be acquired. In our case, it is even tougher to create independent global companies, but that's not an excuse. So we have to make anything we can in order to facilitate the growth of the new generation of Checkpoint and hopefully Mellanox and others. That requires some government policies, that requires incentives, that requires a whole set of factors, and I'm kind of optimistic that there are some things that the government can do in order to make it easier, to make it more practical for companies to grow here. But it's a lot of work, and hopefully we can make it happen.
Do you think it was the right point that Mellanox has been acquired? I think it was a big company and really did a lot in Israel and not just in Ra'anana and Yokneam, but also other things and other places, and then they decided and they acquired it.
So look, we should aspire for building new Mellanox companies and keeping them independent and Israeli companies. We should also realize that once a company grows to a certain extent and becomes a public company, they abide by the public systems and public law and so on. So just that we all understand, Mellanox is governed by the American laws, and it is traded as any other company in the American Stock Exchange. By definition, when the board of directors receives an offer to get acquired, they have to attend to that offer very carefully, and they have to have a very good excuse not to accept it. In many cases they do, in other cases they don't, but keeping this company as an Israeli company is not a good excuse. That's not an excuse that the board of directors can take.
Step out of the Israeli stock exchange.
Right, so I think that what we could do is, for example, make sure that the regulations here are not as they are today, which kept Mellanox out of the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. That was, I think, I'm trying to be politically correct, but I will call this a very stupid move on behalf of our regulators. The fact that Mellanox was not traded here is a total failure of the stock exchange here and the regulation around it and so on. And they made it impossible for Mellanox to trade on a dual listing. They made it impossible for all kind of cultural, stupid conventions that should have never been put in place. And so that's something that could easily be taken care of, and hopefully it will. It will allow for bigger companies to trade here, companies to grow here without the threat of some irrational regulation that will make it hard on them. After all of this happens, I'm optimistic. We have a few dozens of billion-dollar companies here who are still private companies. They will grow. Some of them will mature. Some of them will go public. Some of them will stay independent. And I trust people like the people here in this room. They will build great companies, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's good. So you are sitting in a very comfort zone, being an entrepreneur, investor, etc. Everything that you did from the social entrepreneurship and business entrepreneurship, and columnist in a newspaper, producer, whatever, even writing books. And now you're moving to your next career, leaving everything behind, and it's like going out to fight, to a world which is not easy to any one of us. What made you doing this? Why?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that one out, but let's see. So, look.
I'm not sure everyone in the room knows that you're a politician.
Right, so about 6 weeks ago, I joined a political party. The name was then Chosen LeIsrael, which was a party that had been put together by Benny Gantz, who is the former chief of staff of the Israeli army. He is now the contender against Benjamin Netanyahu on these upcoming elections. I joined his party. 2 days after I joined, we went through a merge, an M&A. So we merged with another party, and as it so happens, in M&As, we were diluted. So I started at spot number 12 in Benny Gantz's party. I moved down to spot number 20 in Kahol Lavan, the blue and white party. So now I'm spot number 20, and as they tell you in major rounds of VCs, when you get diluted, they will tell you the pie will be bigger, so don't worry about dilution. So I still remember myself kind of smiling, because the first announcement Benny Gantz made internally to the party, he gathered all of us and said, we are gathering together, we're putting these two parties together, but don't worry, the pie is going to be bigger. And I said, well, okay. I've seen this pitch already a number of times. The results will tell whether he was right or wrong. We are optimistic, and the upcoming elections are in about 10 days or so. What made me make this move is, as you said, I'm 55 years old. That leaves me only 65 years still to work, doing something. And so I had to make a tough decision. The story goes back a few years ago. Do we still have time? What time do we, we still have a few minutes?
Squeezing a few minutes.
Okay.
Supposed to,
so this is too long of an answer, but it may be worthwhile. So the story starts a few years ago. I used to travel a lot, and so I have this very tough week in Silicon Valley. All of us Israelis who have made this know the drill. You board the plane on Saturday evening, right, Shachar? In my case, it was Sunday evening, because I had some business to do here. You arrive in Silicon Valley on Monday morning. You work 3 days. You take the red eye to New York City. You work for another 2 days. You board a night flight going back to Tel Aviv, and then the world is divided to two types of people. One of them is the one who networks. So you go on this flight, you know that there is an opportunity, it's written in the books. As an entrepreneur, as a VC, as a business person, you know that there is always this great opportunity, because the person sitting next to you will never be able to run away. He's sitting next to you for the next 10, 12 hours. So this is type one of the people. The other type is, I'm going on this plane after a whole week of non-sleeping, totally jet lagged. I'm going to close my eyes, and nobody's going to bother me, and I want to make sure that they understand I have no interest in opening an engagement, a conversation, or anything. I'm not even answering or investment or anything. I'm just going to sleep. I'm that type of a person, by the way. I'm going to sleep on a plane. So I go to my seat on the plane, and here's this guy sitting next to me. I know him just by my first spot. His name is Benny Gantz. So I look at him, he looks at me, so I give him my hand. I said, hello, shalom, לי קוראים Izhar Shay, my name is Izhar Shay. He says, okay, Izhar Shay, nice to meet you, my name is Benny Gantz. So I said, okay, I know who you are. When are you running for a prime minister? That's my second sentence to him. Trust me, that was that one. So he looks at me, and he said, I've heard this question before, and this is where you start a conversation. I was actually still debating whether I'm type 1 or type 2 of the people, but then the pilot goes on the speakers and says, ladies and gentlemen, before we take off, we have a problem, we have to defreeze or unfreeze or whatever, we have to take you off the plane, and I'm going to call you back. So off we go, he goes his way, I go my way, and 2 hours later we meet on the plane, and he looks at me and says, Izhar, Shay, you are with Kena Partners for the last 10 years, you have invested in the following companies, you've written 2 books, you write a column, I like what you did over here, this is what they tell about you, pretty much like you have run down over here, you were burning a kibbutz, and I'm, okay. By the way, he was Rosh Amman, he was the head of the Israeli intelligence at a certain point, so I'm saying, okay, so now we go into conversation. So no sleeping, we spent about 10 hours speaking on the plane, me trying to convince him to become a political candidate. And this started a very interesting relationship for a number of years. So I'm proud to say that I'm one of the people who influenced him to get into politics. Don't take me too seriously for that. I'm one of about, I guess, 500,000 people who told him to go to politics. But I was privileged to have an influence and also to influence the party's charter, the Matzah. I actually wrote some of the political statements about our economic plans, definitely high-tech and innovation and so on. And then when Benny Gantz eventually decided that he was going to launch his party, it was obvious that I'm not joining. Not because he didn't want me, but just because I am sitting in this comfort zone. I have all these interesting things going for me. And frankly, I'm having fun. I'm meeting people like you day in and day out. I'm seeing the most interesting parts of technology on the front end, the bleeding edge of the exciting new stuff. So every day is a new joy, every day is new meetings, and I'm also feeling well. But then it became the question of what's more important and how do we influence the next generation. And I have 4 children, by the way, and at a certain point in life you begin to think about what is the world that they are going to live in, and am I happy or not, and have I been able to influence the kind of world that they are going to live in the next generation. And so eventually this turned to be a very personal decision, which I'm happy to say that it was not only a decision that I took. I think that everybody that I know now in this party, and this is not a propaganda statement, this is just stating what I know about the people who joined Benny Gantz, they all came from very nice, cozy comfort zones, each of them doing whatever they were doing, including myself. We all joined because we believed in the vision, we believed in the need of setting new hope for our children, of setting a new type of dialogue, setting new programs for the next 30 years. Forget about all the bashing and all the bad things that everybody's saying now and whatnot. What made me go into this is a real trust in the vision of what we want to do here for the next 30 years, which is when my kids are going to be my age. And this is what really turned me on into this, and this is what eventually made me make that very tough decision after getting the permission of my children. Remember my dad asking our permission to go into entrepreneurship? I asked my kids the same kind of permission. I think that their decision was even tougher because what they are going to go through, they already are going through, is much tougher than what I went through when my dad decided to do this. And by the way, my dad was given an offer to become a politician and he said absolutely not. That was many years ago. And so I got my kids' permission, I got my wife's blessing and permission, and then I said yes, and here I am.
So we hope that you will be able to influence and really promote the high-tech business. We're looking forward for the business plan for the high-tech market in Israel and worldwide. One last question. We know now more than we knew before, and beside my a little research about your background and everything and what has been written in the newspapers, still, tell us 3 things about yourself that does not appear in the media and we don't know about you. Interesting.
Actually, they have written more in the media than I knew about myself, but let's see. I like to play ping pong with my kids. I was the house champion until about 2 years ago, and then I got beaten very, very hardly by 2 of them, so now I'm kind of carefully playing from time to time. So that was one of my biggest misses in life, not becoming a worldwide champion in ping pong. This was probably stated somewhere, but my family of very well educated children and hopefully wife and mom and dad, we do all kind of cultural stuff. We go to museums, theaters, and so on. But every Saturday or every other Saturday, we dress up with the right gear, and we go to either Bloomfield or now Shkunat Atikva and elsewhere, and we act as very devoted fans to a certain soccer team. So yeah, so that's probably number 2.
Reading about this?
What's that?
I don't remember reading about
All right,
this.
yeah,
Maybe.
probably something new.
Third one?
Wow. Let me think quickly. I'm under pressure here. This lady is looking at me now, blaming. Okay. Okay. One of the songs I like most, that was a quick one. One of the songs I like most is a Hebrew song called Ani ve'ata neshana et ha'olam. So those of you in tough times, when you go through all those hardships of raising money, facing customers, people leaving you, people joining or whatnot, always think about changing the world. That will make it a little bit easier, at least for 60 seconds or whatnot.
Excellent. I really appreciate. I took additional 10 minutes. I hope that your assistant won't kill me. I very much appreciate the time that you took to be with us, and let's hope for success. Thank you very much.
Thank you. תודה רבה.